Imagine walking into a place where everyone expects your arrival, where the world assumes you belong, only to be told, in the coldest, most bureaucratic way possible, that your name doesn't exist. Not in the records, not on any list. You, your children, your family legacy, all erased on paper. For most people, this would be a shock, a moment of confusion, even panic. For Meghan Markle, this was reality. The Montecito preschool she had chosen for Archie and Lilibet, a place she hoped would offer stability, safety, and a sense of normalcy, had no record of her children whatsoever. No names on the official roster. No immunization documents. No acknowledgement. Nothing. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. It sounds unbelievable, almost impossible. And yet, according to sources close to the story, this is exactly what unfolded. One might assume that for the children of a former Duchess of Sussex, the world's eyes would be watching every enrollment, every class list, every small detail. But what happened in Montecito reminds us, in an almost cruel way, that even fame, status, and wealth cannot shield one from bureaucracy, and that sometimes the rules apply even when you think they shouldn't. The questions that immediately arise are obvious. How could this happen? Did the school make an error? Was this a misunderstanding, a glitch in the system? Or, as some suggest, was this a deliberate oversight? And perhaps the most pressing question of all, what does it mean for Archie and Lilibet, who at such a young age are already navigating the public scrutiny that comes with being born into royalty? The situation is complicated. The Montecito preschool in question has a reputation for high standards and careful record-keeping. Parents trust the institution to maintain not just academic records, but crucial health and safety documentation. In the United States, enrollment forms often include immunization records, emergency contacts, allergy information, and proof of residency. Missing records are not a minor oversight. They are a breach of the trust that parents place in educators. For Meghan, this was not just a technicality. It was an affront, a direct challenge to her authority as a mother, and a threat to her children's welfare in a world where every detail of their lives is scrutinized and publicized. Imagine receiving the official confirmation from the school. Your child's name isn't on the list. Not a typo, not a forgotten form. The message was clear. According to the school's records, Archie and Lilibet do not exist in the system. For Meghan, a woman accustomed to navigating complex institutions and media scrutiny, this was both shocking and enraging. Publicly, it may seem like a small administrative error, but privately, the implications are vast. What kind of precedent does this set for other families? How does this affect the children's education, their ability to attend school, or even their legal documentation in the United States? And in Meghan's mind, the questions multiplied, each more pressing than the last. How could a school, tasked with caring for young children, fail to account for two of the most high-profile children in the world? The story gets more complicated when we factor in the immunization issue. In the United States, schools generally require documented proof that children are vaccinated against common illnesses. These records are not merely bureaucratic. They are a matter of public health. Without them, children may be denied enrollment, which raises questions about compliance, safety, and accountability. For Meghan, discovering that there were no records of Archie or Lilibet's vaccinations added fuel to an already blazing fire of frustration. Was this an oversight? Or did it indicate a deeper misunderstanding, or even a conflict, between her expectations and the school's policies? The stakes are high. For a mother, nothing is more urgent than the health and well-being of her children. And for a mother under the unrelenting gaze of the public, the stakes become almost unbearable. Let's pause for a moment and consider the optics. Meghan Markle, once a member of the British royal family, now living in California, trying to give her children an ordinary life amidst extraordinary scrutiny, finds herself embroiled in a conflict most parents could never imagine. And yet, the story has already taken on a life of its own in the media. Headlines around the world have been quick to pick up on the details, some amplifying the drama, others attempting to analyze what it all means. But what the media often misses is the human element, the emotional toll, the sense of violation, the quiet fury of a mother who expects, reasonably, that her children will be recognized and protected wherever they go. For Meghan, this is about more than paperwork. It is about acknowledgement, legitimacy, and the simple right for her children to exist on a list without controversy. And now, consider the broader implications. This is not just a story about a preschool. It is a story about privacy, power, and the collision of two worlds: the structured, formalized world of American education and the highly scrutinized, almost mythic world of royalty. Meghan is caught in the middle, navigating both realms with the weight of the public watching her every move. She is not merely advocating for her children. She is pushing back against a system that, intentionally or not, has ignored their existence. And this raises questions that go beyond one school, one list, or one misunderstanding. How do celebrity families, or former royals, integrate into ordinary institutions? What protections do they need? And what happens when the normal rules of administration collide with extraordinary public expectations? Let's not forget the psychological dimension. For any parent, discovering that your child's name is missing from school records is disorienting, frustrating, and deeply upsetting. For Meghan, this is magnified exponentially by the public spotlight and the constant scrutiny of social media. Imagine trying to explain the situation, knowing that every detail will be analyzed, debated, and sensationalized by a global audience. The stress, the anger, the sense of injustice, all are amplified. And for Archie and Lilibet, the stakes are even higher. They are too young to understand the bureaucratic error, yet they are living its consequences. A preschool is supposed to be a safe, welcoming place where children learn, socialize, and grow. To be effectively erased from that environment, even temporarily, is a disruption that reaches far beyond forms and records. It touches on identity, recognition, and belonging. The story also raises questions about the school itself. How does an institution, with strict policies and procedures, fail to recognize children who are among the most recognized in the world? Were there internal conflicts, miscommunications, or is there something more subtle at play, an issue of privacy, discretion, or misunderstanding about the family's expectations? Sources suggest that the school attempted to clarify the situation, but the damage had already been done. Meghan's reaction, described by insiders as explosive, set off a chain of events that no one could have anticipated. Emails were exchanged, phone calls made, and meetings scheduled, all while the media began to take notice. The ordinary act of enrolling children became a story with international resonance, and the timing could not have been worse. At a moment when Meghan and Harry are navigating life outside the royal spotlight, any perceived slight becomes magnified. For parents, even ordinary ones, the pressure to secure the right school for your child is intense. For Meghan, every decision is under scrutiny, every misstep amplified, every detail reported. And yet, despite the unusual circumstances, the story touches on universal themes: parental frustration, bureaucratic failure, and the desire for recognition and safety for one's children. Anyone who has ever struggled with forms, applications, or administrative hurdles can empathize with her reaction, even if the scale and attention are unlike anything most of us will ever experience. So what happens next? The questions pile up faster than answers arrive. Will the school rectify the situation? Will Meghan escalate her demands? Will the media spin this into another public relations spectacle? And what of the children, caught in the eye of the storm, whose lives are now inadvertently part of a global narrative about privacy, recognition, and parental rights? The story teases complexities that will only deepen as the narrative unfolds, with each revelation promising to challenge assumptions, provoke outrage, and keep audiences on edge. By the end of this introduction, the stage is set. We have a mother incensed, a school caught in an unexpected controversy, and two children whose names, and their health records, have become the center of a dramatic unfolding story. And just when it seems we have reached the height of the tension, the narrative promises more. The initial shock is only the beginning. What Meghan discovered next, according to sources, went beyond missing names or absent records. It hinted at deeper, more surprising complications. Details that could change the public perception of the story entirely. And as we move into the next chapter, we'll uncover exactly what that was, how it happened, and why it matters far beyond Montecito. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine a quiet street in Montecito, California, sun-drenched, palm trees swaying in the breeze, birds chirping in manicured gardens. The picture-perfect neighborhood where celebrities and royalty alike seek privacy and peace. And yet, behind the elegant gates of one well-regarded preschool, a storm is quietly brewing, one that would soon erupt with a force no one anticipated. At first glance, this seems like any ordinary school day. Teachers greeting children, parents chatting over morning coffee, the smell of fresh crayons and disinfectant filling the air. But for Meghan Markle, it was anything but ordinary. She arrived expecting a routine enrollment confirmation for her children, Archie and Lilibet. Instead, she was met with a bureaucratic shock that would ignite a firestorm of emotion and controversy. The school administrator, in a calm but formal tone, confirmed what Meghan had feared. There are no records of your children on our student list. No names, no files, no immunization records. Imagine the scene. A mother standing in disbelief, the words sinking in like stones in water. The children she had brought into the world, nurtured and protected, had been effectively erased from a system designed to care for them. It was a simple statement, sterile and bureaucratic, yet it carried weight heavy enough to send shockwaves across Meghan's entire household. For a woman accustomed to navigating complex institutions and handling public scrutiny, this was a confrontation she had not anticipated. Why would a preschool, especially one known for meticulous administration, fail to record the children of one of the most recognizable families on the planet? Was it an administrative error, a misunderstanding, or something more subtle, perhaps a miscommunication about privacy requests or special accommodations? Sources suggest that the school was initially defensive, citing standard enrollment protocols and confidentiality policies. But Meghan, unwilling to accept ambiguity when it concerned her children, pressed for answers, seeking clarity in a system that, on its surface, seemed intent on maintaining distance. This moment, seemingly small in the grand scope of Meghan and Harry's life, would quickly escalate into a multi-layered controversy, drawing attention from local media, social networks, and even international outlets. It wasn't just a matter of missing names. It was a narrative that struck at the intersection of parental rights, celebrity privacy, and institutional bureaucracy. The omission was minor on paper, but monumental in impact, touching on issues of recognition, legitimacy, and control. Meghan's reaction, described by insiders as both fiery and precise, highlighted the personal stakes at play. Consider the implications. A child's name missing from a school roster is not merely a clerical problem. In the United States, enrollment forms are tightly regulated, requiring proof of residency, completed applications, and documented immunizations. Without these records, children may be denied access to classrooms, extracurricular activities, or even field trips. The oversight, or deliberate omission, threatened to create not only logistical chaos, but also emotional distress for the children themselves. For Archie and Lillibet, still young and largely shielded from the public eye, this administrative misstep carried consequences that could ripple through their formative experiences. Sources close to the family have described Meghan's response as swift and relentless. She demanded meetings with school administrators, requested a full review of enrollment files, and insisted on verification of any communications that had been exchanged prior to her visit. The friction was immediate. Staff, accustomed to dealing with high-profile families discreetly, found themselves navigating a combination of administrative scrutiny and maternal determination. Emails flew back and forth, phone calls were scheduled, and each exchange added another layer of tension to a situation that had already captured the attention of local media. Yet, as the initial shock subsided, questions began to multiply. Was this an isolated incident, unique to Meghan's family, or did it reflect deeper systemic issues within the school's administration? Could there have been internal misunderstandings among staff members, differing interpretations of privacy requests, or conflicting instructions about record-keeping for celebrity children? Experts in school administration note that high-profile families often request additional privacy protections, which can inadvertently lead to discrepancies in standard enrollment processes. But even accounting for these possibilities, the complete absence of records for two children, both under intense public scrutiny, remained highly irregular. Adding another layer of complexity was the matter of immunization records. In California, as in much of the United States, children cannot attend school without proof of certain vaccinations. These records are not mere formalities. They are critical to maintaining public health standards. Meghan, aware of these requirements, was reportedly alarmed to learn that no documentation existed on file. The situation shifted from administrative frustration to potential regulatory concern. What did this mean for the children's enrollment status? Were they temporarily barred from participating in classroom activities? And how would this discrepancy be addressed without attracting further public attention? The human element cannot be overstated. Imagine the emotional roller coaster for a parent in this situation. Shock, disbelief, frustration, and determination all converging at once. Meghan, a woman who has experienced life in the glare of global media, understands the power of perception. Every interaction, every phone call, every email in this moment was not merely about resolving a clerical error. It was about asserting agency over her family's lives, protecting her children, and ensuring that they were recognized as legitimate members of the school community. The personal and public stakes intertwined, creating a perfect storm of tension, drama, and urgency. Observers have noted that this confrontation also underscores the challenge of reconciling private life with public persona. Meghan and Harry, though no longer working royals, are still under constant scrutiny. Their choices, including mundane matters like school enrollment, are amplified through social media, tabloid coverage, and global news outlets. What might be an ordinary parental struggle for any other family becomes, in this context, a story of international intrigue, public opinion, and cultural commentary. The missing names are no longer just a clerical issue. They are a narrative focal point, a symbol of the intersection between celebrity, privilege, and ordinary human frustration. As the initial shock gave way to action, sources report that Meghan requested a full audit of school records. She demanded explanations for the omissions, documentation of all communications, and a verification of all administrative processes. Meetings were scheduled with administrators who, despite their professionalism, appeared caught off guard by the intensity of the situation. What began as a routine enrollment confirmation had escalated into a procedural confrontation, amplified by the unique status of the children involved. Every conversation, every decision, was now weighted with significance far beyond the typical parent-school interaction. Even as the situation unfolded, questions began to circulate externally. Social media users speculated on the reasons for the omission, journalists sought confirmation from multiple sources, and online communities debated the implications of the missing names. The story became a reflection of broader societal issues. How systems designed for ordinary families interact with extraordinary ones, how privacy and bureaucracy collide, and how quickly a seemingly minor oversight can escalate into public controversy. For Meghan, these external pressures added to an already complex scenario, forcing her to navigate not only administrative challenges, but also the court of public opinion. And yet, despite the tension, there were glimmers of clarity. Sources indicate that school officials began retracing steps, reviewing files, and contacting previous administrators to locate missing documentation. The process was meticulous, time-consuming, and fraught with potential missteps. Every discovery, every clarification, revealed both answers and new questions. It became apparent that what seemed like a simple clerical issue was in fact a multi-layered problem involving privacy protocols, administrative gaps, and miscommunications that may have spanned months. By the end of this chapter of events, the situation remained unresolved, leaving both Meghan and the public in suspense. The initial revelation, the erasure of her children's names, was only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface lay questions about regulatory compliance, parental rights, media attention, and institutional transparency. And as Meghan prepared to take her next steps, the narrative promised even greater surprises. What she discovered next, according to sources, was not just a procedural oversight, but a revelation that would challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and keep the world watching. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Imagine the situation from a parent's perspective. You have two young children, bright, lively, and full of curiosity, and you've done everything necessary to secure their place in school. You've filled out forms meticulously, provided documentation, followed every step in the enrollment process. And yet, when you check the records, it's as if your children do not exist. This is exactly the scenario Meghan Markle faced with her children, Archie and Lilibet, in Montecito. The shock of discovering that neither of their names appeared on the official school roster was just the beginning. For a mother who had spent years meticulously planning for her family's well-being and education, this oversight, or omission, felt like a personal affront. At first glance, the missing names might seem like a simple administrative error. Schools handle dozens of enrollments each semester, and mistakes do happen. But in this case, the stakes were higher than usual. These weren't just any children. These were the children of Meghan Markle, a woman who had navigated the glare of international scrutiny, intense media coverage, and the rigid structures of royal protocol. Archie and Lilibet, though young, are public figures in their own right. Every step they take is observed, every detail scrutinized. That their names were missing in a school system designed to track students meticulously was, to many observers, an almost surreal contradiction. Children who cannot be accounted for in an institution meant to serve them. Sources close to the family revealed that Meghan's first reaction was a combination of disbelief and incredulity. Emails, forms, and confirmations she believed had been processed were now apparently lost, or never entered into the system in the first place. The immediate question that sprang to mind was, how could this happen? Was this a simple oversight by an overworked administrative assistant? Or was there a deeper issue, perhaps related to privacy concerns, given the family's high profile? Some insiders suggested that requests for discretion and confidentiality may have inadvertently led to the children being excluded from standard record-keeping procedures. If true, this would mean that a well-intentioned effort to protect their privacy had backfired, creating a situation that threatened their access to education and safety within the school environment. Adding complexity to the situation was the emotional impact on Meghan herself. This was not just about paperwork or administrative minutiae. It was about recognition. To have your children's identities, so fundamental to their being, questioned or omitted from a system that is supposed to safeguard them is jarring. Parents naturally want to see their children acknowledged and protected in every environment. And for Meghan, this went beyond the ordinary. Her response, according to insiders, was immediate and assertive. She demanded answers from the school, scrutinizing every piece of correspondence and every document to determine where the process had broken down. The tension was palpable, and the stakes were high. Not just for her, but for Archie and Lilibet, whose presence or absence in the official records now carried significant consequences. One possible explanation for the missing names involves the family's request for discretion. High-profile families often request special accommodations to protect their privacy. In practice, this can mean that children's names are listed differently or that administrative procedures are handled through private channels. While such measures are designed to protect, they can sometimes create unintended confusion or errors. In Meghan's case, sources indicate that privacy requests may have been interpreted differently by various administrative staff, leading to Archie and Lillibet not being entered into the standard system. This scenario highlights the delicate balance schools must strike between accommodating privacy concerns and maintaining accurate records, a balance that, in this instance, appears to have failed. But beyond administrative explanations, the public and media reaction added another layer of pressure. Once news of the missing names became known, speculation ran rampant. Was this an intentional oversight? A bureaucratic snafu? Or, as some theorists suggested, a subtle commentary on the integration of high-profile families into ordinary systems? Social media users debated endlessly, journalists chased leads, and online forums buzzed with conjecture. The narrative had moved beyond the school walls, and Meghan's response became a focal point for discussions about celebrity, motherhood, and institutional accountability. Every action she took was analyzed, every statement scrutinized. In the glare of this attention, the simple question of her children's enrollment had transformed into a public spectacle. Emotional tension intensified further when it became clear that the missing names could have real-world implications for the children. Without official records, Archie and Lilibet risked being denied access to certain school activities or being excluded from emergency procedures. This was no longer a theoretical issue. It had immediate consequences for their daily lives. For Meghan, the stakes were deeply personal. She was not merely advocating for procedural correctness, but actively protecting her children's rights, safety, and inclusion. The frustration she felt was compounded by the awareness that, in addition to managing a bureaucratic challenge, she was also under constant public scrutiny. Every phone call, every meeting, every inquiry became a matter of public interest, magnifying the intensity of the situation. At the heart of this controversy lies a fundamental tension, the intersection of private life and public identity. For most families, missing names on a school roster might be irritating, but ultimately manageable. For Meghan, every detail of her children's lives is amplified by media attention, online speculation, and the expectations of both supporters and critics. The omission of Archie and Lilibet's names, therefore, was not just a clerical error. It was a challenge to her authority as a mother, a disruption to the normalcy she sought for her children, and a flashpoint for public debate. The emotional stakes are clear: the well-being of her children, her credibility, and her ability to navigate ordinary systems without interference from external forces. Sources indicate that Meghan did not approach the situation passively. She requested meetings with school administrators, sought clarifications about internal procedures, and demanded full transparency regarding enrollment records. The school, for its part, appeared both surprised and cautious. Staff members were reportedly unprepared for the intensity of Meghan's response, having expected a more routine inquiry. Emails and phone calls multiplied, creating a tense environment where each interaction carried heightened significance. What might have been a minor administrative matter became a drawn-out negotiation, with real-world implications for Archie and Lilibet. The situation also sparked broader questions about how high-profile families integrate into everyday institutions. Schools are designed for children, plain and simple, but what happens when those children are under constant public scrutiny? How do administrators balance the need for standard procedures with the desire to respect privacy and accommodate exceptional circumstances? In this case, the balance appears to have tipped, leaving Meghan to navigate the consequences. Her insistence on resolving the matter underscores a larger principle: parental advocacy, even under extraordinary circumstances, cannot be compromised. Every child deserves recognition, protection, and the assurance that their presence is officially acknowledged. Even as the school worked to clarify the situation, uncertainty lingered. Were there gaps in record-keeping? Were internal policies misunderstood? Or did this incident reveal deeper flaws in how the school manages enrollments for families with special privacy considerations? Meghan's determination to uncover the truth ensured that these questions would not go unanswered. According to insiders, she approached the matter with methodical precision, requesting every relevant document, reviewing correspondence, and seeking clarity on procedures that might have contributed to the oversight. Her approach was both maternal and strategic. She was not merely reacting emotionally. She was ensuring that her children's rights and recognition were fully protected. And yet, despite her efforts, the narrative remained unresolved. Public speculation continued, and the missing names continued to loom as a symbol of bureaucratic tension, parental frustration, and institutional challenge. The story had evolved from a simple administrative oversight into a case study in how extraordinary circumstances collide with ordinary systems. It was a tale of recognition, legitimacy, and the relentless pursuit of acknowledgement in the face of oversight, or perhaps even indifference. By the end of this chapter, the stakes had only grown higher. Meghan had uncovered the initial issue, the missing names, but what she discovered next would complicate matters even further. Sources indicate that the absence of Archie and Lilibet from the school's roster was just the beginning, hinting at deeper procedural and bureaucratic irregularities that would soon demand attention. The narrative promised further surprises, questions, and revelations that would challenge assumptions, provoke debate, and keep audiences engaged. But what came next would reveal complications far beyond missing names, and the implications would reach into the very heart of how Meghan and Harry's family navigates life in California and beyond. The missing names were shocking, Yes, but what followed immediately after, the revelation about immunization records, turned a bureaucratic inconvenience into a potential crisis. In California, as in most of the United States, no child can attend school without documented proof of immunizations. These records are not merely a formality. They exist to protect every child from preventable diseases, to ensure public safety, and to maintain the integrity of the educational system. For Meghan Markle, discovering that Montecito preschool had no records of Archie and Lilibet's vaccinations was more than a bureaucratic headache. It was a deeply alarming situation, one that threatened both her children's ability to attend classes and their health safeguards within the school environment. Imagine a parent arriving at the school, having meticulously prepared every document, every record, confident that their children are fully compliant with all requirements. And then hearing the words, "We have no immunization records for your children." Even for ordinary parents, the panic would be immediate. For Meghan, already navigating the stress of missing names on the roster, this was a second, compounding blow, a situation that challenged her ability to protect her children in both practical and institutional ways. According to insiders, her immediate reaction was one of disbelief, rapidly followed by a determination to uncover exactly how this could have happened and to ensure it would be rectified without delay. The school, on its part, reportedly cited standard administrative procedures. They claimed that immunization records had not been received or logged, that forms might have been misplaced, or that privacy protocols might have inadvertently prevented proper recording. But for Meghan, these explanations were insufficient. This was not a minor clerical oversight. It was a systemic lapse with tangible consequences. Without these records, her children could be excluded from school activities, barred from certain programs, or even challenged legally in terms of enrollment eligibility. The urgency was real. Experts in school administration explained that missing immunization records are taken seriously because of their public health implications. Schools rely on accurate reporting to prevent outbreaks of communicable diseases such as measles, mumps, and whooping cough. A child without verified documentation can disrupt this carefully balanced system. In Meghan's case, the high-profile nature of her family amplified the stakes. While a typical parent might receive a warning or request for immediate submission of records, Meghan's children were under public scrutiny. The omission threatened not only compliance with legal requirements, but also the optics of responsibility and care for a family already observed under the world's microscope. Sources indicate that Meghan immediately took action. She requested all records of submission from the school, reviewed correspondence with administrative staff, and demanded clarity on every point where the process had failed. Emails were exchanged, phone calls made, and meetings scheduled. The tension escalated because, in parallel, the public and media had already begun speculating on the situation. Questions circulated. Had the family failed to provide records? Was the school negligent? Was there a privacy dispute underlying the omission? Every interaction was scrutinized, every explanation analyzed. Some reports suggest that the lack of immunization records may have been related to special privacy accommodations requested by Meghan and Harry. High-profile families often ask for additional measures to protect their children's personal information, sometimes resulting in alternate filing systems or restricted access to sensitive data. While these measures are intended to safeguard privacy, they can unintentionally cause gaps in standard record keeping. In this case, if the records were filed differently or managed through a separate protocol, staff members unfamiliar with these procedures might have assumed that the documentation had not been submitted at all. The result, a discrepancy with potentially serious implications. The emotional dimension of this revelation cannot be overstated. For Meghan, it was a mix of frustration, urgency, and protective instinct. She was confronting an institution that had seemingly failed to fulfill its core responsibilities to her children, and the stakes were immediate. Unlike abstract bureaucratic errors, missing immunization records can directly affect a child's ability to participate in daily activities, from classroom learning to playground interactions. For a mother already battling against systemic oversights and public scrutiny, the combination was a perfect storm. The school's response, according to insiders, was initially cautious. Administrators attempted to explain the situation through standard policies and procedural missteps, emphasizing that no harm had been intended. They reiterated confidentiality rules and privacy protocols, suggesting that the missing records could have resulted from an internal miscommunication. But for Meghan, the explanation was insufficient. The children's health and education were not negotiable, and she pressed for immediate action to rectify the lapse. Complicating the matter further, legal and regulatory frameworks in California make it clear that schools must maintain accurate immunization records. Failure to do so could expose the institution to compliance issues with state health authorities. For Meghan, awareness of this regulatory context added urgency. This was not merely a personal frustration. It was a systemic issue with legal, procedural, and ethical dimensions. The absence of records was, effectively, a failure in institutional duty, whether accidental or procedural. Public perception also added pressure. Once news of the missing immunization records leaked, whether intentionally or through speculation, social media erupted. Critics questioned the family's responsibility, while supporters rallied to defend Meghan's maternal vigilance. Media outlets framed the story in a range of ways, from minor administrative error to scandalous oversight. The narrative was complicated by the intersection of celebrity culture, privacy concerns, and public health obligations. Meghan's response, measured but firm, became a focal point in a story that extended far beyond the preschool walls. The practical consequences were immediate. Without documented immunizations, Archie and Lilibet could not officially attend classes or participate in routine school activities. This was not a theoretical threat. It had the potential to disrupt their educational experience. Sources indicate that Meghan explored all avenues to remedy the situation, from verifying submissions to arranging expedited processing of any missing documentation. The urgency was compounded by her awareness that even minor delays could attract further media attention, complicate her children's social integration, and magnify public scrutiny of her parenting choices. The controversy also highlights a broader societal issue: how institutions balance standard procedures with extraordinary circumstances. Most families comply with enrollment protocols without incident. But high-profile families, particularly those accustomed to both global attention and extraordinary discretion, create unique challenges. Privacy measures designed to protect children can inadvertently lead to procedural lapses. Administrative structures, designed for predictability, struggle when faced with exceptions. In this case, the intersection of public scrutiny, institutional rules, and parental vigilance created a scenario where missing immunization records became a flashpoint for broader tensions. Insiders suggest that Meghan's insistence on resolving the issue swiftly reflected both her protective instincts and her understanding of the broader implications. The children's safety and recognition were paramount, but so too was the principle of accountability. By demanding clarity and immediate action, Meghan was asserting her right as a parent to ensure that bureaucratic oversights did not compromise her children's welfare. Every phone call, every email, every meeting was not merely procedural. It was a demonstration of maternal advocacy in the face of institutional failure. As the story unfolded, it became clear that missing immunization records were only part of a larger narrative of oversight, miscommunication, and bureaucratic tension. The initial shock of missing names had now compounded into an issue that could affect the children's daily lives, legal standing, and public perception. For Meghan, the stakes were deeply personal and intensely urgent. By the end of this chapter, the situation had escalated from an administrative curiosity to a matter of tangible consequence. The missing immunization records had created a multidimensional conflict involving legal, institutional, and parental responsibilities. Yet, even as Meghan worked to resolve the issue, insiders hinted that the most surprising revelations were still to come. Details that could further complicate the enrollment process, challenge assumptions about the school's competence, and push the story into new, unexpected territory. But what came next would reveal contradictions and complications that no one, not even Meghan, anticipated, and the implications would ripple far beyond the classroom. The story of missing names and absent immunization records might have ended as a mere bureaucratic debacle, a headline-grabbing curiosity about a preschool enrollment gone wrong. But in the hours and days that followed, a far more complex picture began to emerge, thanks to insiders willing to speak, sometimes anonymously, about what was happening behind the scenes. These sources painted a picture of tension, confusion, and friction within Montecito preschool that went beyond clerical errors. According to reports, the staff were caught off guard by the intensity of Meghan Markle's inquiries, and administrators scrambled to explain, clarify, and contain a situation that quickly escalated beyond their expectations. Imagine the perspective of an ordinary staff member. You work in a reputable preschool known for structure, rules, and routine, and one day a high-profile parent arrives with serious concerns about her children. Not just any children, two of the most famous children in the world. The staff must navigate the usual requirements for forms, immunizations, and enrollment while also managing the heightened scrutiny that comes with celebrity families. According to insiders, some staff were confused about privacy requests that Meghan and Harry had previously submitted. Special accommodations, intended to protect the children's identities, may have inadvertently caused lapses in standard record-keeping. Staff who had not been briefed fully on the requests were left uncertain about how to log the information, and the result was an administrative limbo. The children existed in some files, but not in the official roster. These internal discrepancies were compounded by miscommunications among the administrative team. One source explained that staff members had assumed someone else had completed the enrollment verification or filed the immunization records. Another noted that certain emails may have been filtered through privacy channels, delaying acknowledgement of submitted forms. The cumulative effect was that, for weeks, Archie and Lilibet's information sat in a shadowed corner of the administrative system, technically present but effectively invisible. For Meghan, discovering this was like stepping into a room where the walls themselves seemed to conspire against recognition. Insiders also described the emotional environment within the school as increasingly tense. Teachers and administrators, aware of the media attention and the high-profile nature of the family, reportedly felt under pressure to respond correctly, both to the parent and, indirectly, to the public narrative forming online. One staff member allegedly said that emails and phone calls from Meghan were precise but forceful, leaving little room for casual errors. Another source suggested that staff were worried about overstepping privacy boundaries, creating a paradox where caution and miscommunication led to procedural lapses. The dynamic was fraught. Well-intentioned efforts to respect privacy collided with bureaucratic structure, producing a situation that was confusing, frustrating, and escalating by the hour. The internal memos obtained by sources shed light on additional complexities. Some notes hinted at previous discussions about high-profile families' enrollments, with staff debating whether to place these children in standard record-keeping systems or maintain separate, more secure files. Others indicated that there had been uncertainty about how to handle immunization records when privacy requests were in place. These documents reveal a school attempting to balance compliance, confidentiality, and parental expectations, and underscore how small gaps in understanding can magnify into high-stakes conflicts. From Meghan's perspective, the revelations provided both clarity and validation. The missing names, the absent immunization records, and the staff confusion were not evidence of negligence, but rather the unintended consequences of poorly executed accommodations. She could see how procedural gaps allowed for this oversight, but that did not lessen the urgency of the matter. According to sources, she approached the situation methodically, requesting all relevant records, tracking every communication, and insisting that the school provide a full explanation. In her view, the issue was not simply about paperwork. It was about ensuring her children's safety, recognition, and rightful place in the educational system. The insiders' accounts also hint at another dimension: the presence of conflicting advice among staff members. One faction reportedly argued for expedience, suggesting that immediate correction of the records would prevent further escalation. Another faction expressed concern about overstepping legal and privacy boundaries, advocating for careful review before any adjustments were made. This internal tug-of-war created delays, miscommunications, and heightened tension, reinforcing Meghan's perception that the system was failing her children. What makes this situation particularly remarkable is how quickly internal confusion became external controversy. As word of missing names and immunization records spread, through leaks, social media speculation, and informal reporting, public attention intensified. Insider sources suggest that some staff feared the story would spiral, attracting media attention beyond the local level and perhaps even international scrutiny. The combination of celebrity parents, missing documentation, and public interest created a pressure cooker environment where each decision carried amplified consequences. The emotional stakes, from the perspective of these inside sources, were significant. Teachers reportedly felt a mixture of guilt, frustration, and anxiety. Administrators were torn between adhering to privacy policies and rectifying a procedural failure. And throughout, Meghan maintained a presence that was firm, precise, and unrelenting, emphasizing her role as a parent who would not accept ambiguity when it came to her children. According to insiders, this intensity was both intimidating and motivating, pushing staff to examine every step of the enrollment process, every archived email, and every procedural guideline. Adding to the tension, sources revealed that previous attempts to address similar situations with other high-profile families had produced mixed results. Some staff noted that requests for additional discretion often led to delays, misfilings, or procedural ambiguity. In this context, Meghan's case became a catalyst, exposing vulnerabilities in the school system and forcing administrators to reevaluate policies they had taken for granted. The oversight of Archie and Lilibet was no longer simply a clerical error. It was a symptom of a systemic challenge that had gone untested until now. Insider accounts also hint at subtle interpersonal dynamics. One staff member reportedly expressed frustration at the perceived intensity of Meghan's scrutiny, while another described admiration for her thoroughness and insistence on accountability. These contrasting attitudes reflect the broader tension between administrative protocol and parental advocacy. The school had procedures to follow, but Meghan's insistence on resolution disrupted the usual equilibrium, revealing the limitations of even well-organized institutions when confronted with extraordinary circumstances. As the situation unfolded, multiple rounds of clarification were initiated. Staff reviewed every file, checked every communication thread, and cross-referenced every document, trying to determine where the process had failed. According to sources, the effort was exhaustive and exhausting. Every step revealed new questions. Were records misfiled? Were privacy protocols misinterpreted? Were prior submissions lost in internal filters? The layers of complexity grew with each discovery, making resolution difficult and prolonging tension. At the same time, insiders reported that Meghan remained focused, strategic, and unwavering. She did not lash out indiscriminately. Instead, she asked precise questions, demanded transparency, and sought verifiable solutions. Her approach underscored a dual focus: immediate correction of the records and a systemic understanding of why the oversight had occurred in the first place. The combination of maternal protection and methodical advocacy created a pressure on staff that, while challenging, ultimately prompted a more thorough investigation into the processes governing high-profile enrollments. By the end of this chapter, the internal revelations provided clarity but also hinted at deeper issues. Missing names and immunization records were symptomatic of broader challenges. Miscommunication, procedural ambiguity, and the difficulty of balancing privacy with administrative rigor. Meghan's insistence on accountability exposed these vulnerabilities and forced the school to confront them head-on. And yet, even as insiders shared their perspective, it became apparent that the most startling elements of this story had yet to surface. Sources hinted that what Meghan discovered next would not only expose procedural flaws, but also reveal contradictions and complications that went beyond the school itself. Issues that could involve external institutions, public perception, and questions about the integration of her family into ordinary systems in ways no one had anticipated. But what came next would escalate the situation to a level no one at Montecito, or the world outside, could have predicted. And it would change everything about how this story unfolded. The revelations from inside the preschool had set the stage, but what followed was where the story truly ignited. Meghan Markle's response to the missing names and absent immunization records was swift, decisive, and unmistakably fierce. Those closest to her describe it as a blend of maternal instinct, strategic advocacy, and controlled fury, the kind of determination only a mother under extraordinary circumstances could summon. For weeks, Meghan had navigated the pressures of parenthood in the public eye, media scrutiny, and administrative complexity, but this confrontation at Montecito preschool struck a nerve that went beyond procedure. It was personal. Imagine the scene. Meghan standing in the administrative office, facing staff who are tense, anxious, and unaccustomed to such direct scrutiny from a parent of her profile. According to insiders, she did not raise her voice unnecessarily, nor did she act impulsively. Instead, she was precise, methodical, and unyielding. Her questions cut to the heart of the issue. Why were Archie and Lilibet not listed? Why were their immunization records absent? Who was responsible? And how could this be corrected immediately? Every inquiry was measured, but the weight of her presence was undeniable. Administrators reportedly felt both challenged and pressured, realizing that the stakes were far higher than they had ever imagined. The intensity of Meghan's response was amplified by her awareness of the broader implications. This was not just about two children's enrollment. It was about recognition, legitimacy, and the principle that every child deserves proper acknowledgement and protection. Missing names and records might seem minor on the surface, but for a family under constant public scrutiny, such oversights become magnified. Every detail has significance, every omission carries potential consequences, and every response reflects not just on the parents, but on the children themselves. Meghan understood this dynamic fully. Her advocacy was not performative. It was protective, strategic, and relentless. Sources describe a series of high-pressure meetings in the days that followed. Emails were exchanged at all hours, phone calls carried a sense of urgency, and documents were scrutinized line by line. Meghan demanded transparency. She requested proof of submission for every form, verification of every step in the enrollment process, and clarity on internal procedures that may have contributed to the oversight. Administrators, caught in a delicate balance of compliance, privacy, and public relations, scrambled to respond. Some were intimidated by her insistence, while others acknowledged the validity of her concerns. The atmosphere, according to insiders, was tense, charged with a mixture of fear, respect, and urgency. What made Meghan's response particularly formidable was her ability to blend emotion with strategy. She did not simply express anger. She coupled it with actionable demands. She sought accountability, but also solutions. According to insiders, she offered clear guidance on what she needed to resolve the situation. A full audit of school records, confirmation of the children's immunization status, and an immediate update to the official roster. Her approach reflected both a personal imperative to safeguard her children and a broader understanding of institutional mechanics, recognizing that procedural lapses could have ripple effects if not addressed thoroughly. At the same time, Meghan's response was not without emotional intensity. Sources describe moments where her frustration was palpable, a mixture of disbelief and righteous indignation. She had followed every required protocol, submitted documentation, and expected the school to honor its obligations. That these basic expectations had been thwarted by miscommunication or oversight was intolerable. Her anger, however, was channeled constructively. It fueled the urgency of her demands and underscored the seriousness of the situation. She was not merely complaining. She was mobilizing resources, enforcing accountability, and ensuring that her children's well-being remained paramount. The media quickly picked up on the story, and Meghan's assertiveness became a focal point for public discussion. Headlines ranged from sympathetic, emphasizing her protective instincts and maternal vigilance, to critical, framing her intensity as excessive or confrontational. Social media debates erupted, dissecting every element of the dispute, from administrative procedures to celebrity entitlement. Insiders suggest that Meghan anticipated the public reaction but chose to focus on what mattered most, rectifying the situation for Archie and Lilibet. She reportedly ignored commentary and speculation, concentrating instead on direct engagement with school staff and documentation review. This response was also shaped by Meghan's awareness of precedent. High-profile families often face challenges integrating into ordinary systems, from schools to medical institutions. Privacy measures, celebrity status, and media attention can complicate standard procedures, creating the potential for oversights and misunderstandings. Meghan's approach reflected her recognition of these dynamics. By asserting control, demanding transparency, and insisting on accountability, she was not only addressing immediate concerns but also setting a framework for future interactions with institutional systems. According to sources, Meghan's meetings with administrators were meticulous. She questioned every step of the enrollment process, scrutinized the handling of forms and records, and requested detailed explanations for procedural decisions. Her insistence on clarity forced staff to confront discrepancies and gaps they may have previously overlooked. Emails circulated at all hours, phone calls were made to confirm every detail, and internal audits were initiated to reconcile records. The administrative process, once routine, became a high-stakes operation, with Meghan steering the course. Insiders also revealed that Meghan's response was informed by both her knowledge of protocol and her strategic awareness. She recognized that the situation had broader implications, from public perception to regulatory compliance. Missing immunization records, for example, could attract scrutiny from health authorities, while absent names on the roster could impact emergency procedures and classroom participation. Meghan's advocacy ensured that these issues were not treated as minor oversights but addressed comprehensively, minimizing risk and reinforcing her children's safety and recognition. The intensity of her response reportedly had a ripple effect throughout the staff. Teachers and administrators became hyper-aware of procedural gaps, re-examining every file and communication thread. Some were initially defensive, but many came to appreciate the necessity of thorough review and correction. Meghan's insistence on transparency and accountability pushed the institution to a level of diligence it may not have previously achieved. By the end of this chapter, Meghan's fury had transformed from immediate emotional reaction to strategic action. The initial shock of missing names and immunization records had escalated into a multi-layered conflict, drawing the attention of staff, regulators, and the media. Her approach demonstrated that parental advocacy, when combined with precision, determination, and strategic foresight, can compel institutions to confront errors and implement solutions, even under extraordinary circumstances. And yet, even as Meghan appeared to gain traction, insiders hint that the story was far from resolved. What she discovered next would not only challenge procedural assumptions, but also expose contradictions, conflicts, and revelations that could change the trajectory of the entire controversy. But what came next would surprise everyone, pushing the story beyond bureaucratic frustration and into territory no one expected. And it would test the limits of both her patience and her strategy. As Meghan Markle's confrontation with Montecito preschool intensified behind closed doors, the story was already escaping into the public sphere. What began as a private, administrative dispute, missing names, absent immunization records, and procedural lapses, quickly became fodder for a media frenzy that no one could have fully anticipated. Within hours of insider leaks and anonymous tips, headlines were splashed across tabloids, social media, and entertainment news outlets worldwide. Suddenly, what had been a personal parental issue was transformed into a public spectacle, dissected, debated, and sensationalized on a global scale. Imagine waking up to see your private struggle splashed across multiple platforms, every word dissected, every action scrutinized. That was the reality Meghan faced. News outlets ran with variations of the story. Markle children missing from preschool records, no immunization documentation for royal kids, Montecito school chaos, Meghan furious. Social media exploded with threads speculating on the situation. Critics questioned the family's responsibility, others debated the school's competence, and commentators weighed in on the ethics of high-profile parents navigating ordinary systems. Every detail was analyzed, from the timeline of forms submitted to Meghan's purported reaction during meetings. What made the media frenzy particularly intense was the combination of celebrity and controversy. Meghan is not merely a public figure. She is a woman who has spent years navigating the global spotlight, dealing with tabloid scrutiny, and managing narratives around her personal life. Every move she makes is amplified. In this context, a routine school enrollment issue becomes more than paperwork. It becomes a story about parenting, privilege, and power. The public, accustomed to viewing Meghan through the lens of royal drama and celebrity culture, approached this story with pre-existing assumptions, ensuring that every report carried emotion, speculation, or bias. Insiders note that the school itself struggled to respond to media inquiries. Staff were unprepared for the intense spotlight, uncertain how to comment without violating privacy laws or disclosing sensitive information. Press releases were delayed, statements were carefully worded, and attempts to clarify procedural steps were often overshadowed by speculation and opinion pieces. The result was a feedback loop. Incomplete information fueled more headlines, which drew more attention to the missing names and immunization records, which in turn pressured both the school and Meghan to act decisively.